Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and welcome to our fifth and the final episode of the first set of our Inspire series. This is a particularly challenging time that we are going through, and whilst we all need to remain committed to our businesses, we all need to look for some inspiration in our day-to-day activities. So thank you all for making the time today to come and join us in what promises to be yet another very inspirational and insightful episode run through the IOCO Inspire series. Last week we hosted John Vlismus, former comedian, now lecturer and businessman, where he shared some of his experiences at the Henley Business School, and he spoke a little bit about why adaptability is critical even during good times. This week we would like to extend a very, very warm welcome to Anton Musgrave, founder of Future World International. Anton is no stranger to the EOH family, and today he will be engaging us on the topic of leadership in an exponential world. Please can we ask that everyone post their questions and their comments in the chat option for Anton, and we will deal with that later in the conversation. And with that, I'm very excited for the next hour and would like to hand over to our international speaker, Colin Owls of Innovation Catalyst, who will be facilitating the conversation today. Over to you, Colin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fatima. And we'll do our best to make this inspirational, as it is titled the Inspire series. And if we're going to have any fighting chance of doing that, we've got the best possible guest on the panel with Anton. If you don't know Anton, he is one of the most inspirational speakers that I've ever come across. As you said, Fatima, you know, he's the CEO, founder, one of the co-founders of Future World. And I've been following them and engaging with them for several years now. For me, it was life-changing when I first met Anton a number of years back to get his perspective, a very different perspective on what you need to do if you're going to be a leader in an exponential world. So all that's to come, because we're going to be quizzing Anton about exponential leadership. But to all our participants, welcome. I'm going to throw up a poll very quickly, which it would be fantastic to get your initial views before we get started, and also to test whether polling is going to work on Zoom. I'm launching it now. It's a very simple yes or no question. I'm very curious to see what the answers are. The other thing, of course, would be great you can do is in your chat, just say hello to everyone else. Just make sure that's working. And then as we go through this, please do ask your questions. You will get them answered quicker, if at all, if you put it through the Q&A functionality. But whether you put it in the Q&A or in the chat channel, we will try to go and get to it. Anton, while they're answering the poll, welcome.
Colin, thanks very much. It's great to be here and really, really looking forward to the session. I had a quiet chuckle to myself when Fatima mentioned the previous speaker was a former comedian. I hope I'm not the current comedian.
Yeah, we had John Vlismus on. It was excellent, very different perspective, but fascinating. I asked him what skills you need to be a comedian, and I thought it was telling. Is you basically have to be born into it and extremely self-conscious, manically depressed, worried about life in general. Otherwise, there's no way that you're going to go and become a comedian at any point in time. But he was fascinating. He had the story about how they've been transforming Henley Business School, and within 12 or 13 days, they really took it from a very standard model to a kind of online model. And I think it was an incredible story. Anyway, that was last week's story. We're doing exponential leadership. I'm going to end the poll and share it, because the first question for you, Anton, is do you believe that we're living in an exponential world?
Colin, for me, it's absolutely a resounding, very positive yes. I think so many things have changed. And you know, if you just think about the definition of linear, or the difference between linear and exponential, and a very simple sort of calibration point is if you take 30 linear steps, you sort of land up the corridor where the espresso machine is, which is not a bad place to be. But that's how far you get. When you take 1, 2, 3, 4, only 30 of those linear steps. But if a human took 30 exponential steps, in other words, the first step is 1, the second step is 2 meters, the third step is 4 meters, and the fourth is 8, etc. And you still only take 30 of those steps, you actually end up traveling 26 times around the planet. Just kind of get that in your mind in terms of the scale difference between linear and exponential. And in almost every single dimension that we'll unpack this afternoon, we are seeing exponential differences between the world today and the world, certainly 5, maybe even certainly 10 and 20 years ago. And we'll unpack them, I'm sure, one by one.
Yeah, let's go into that, because I talk to a lot of experts, as you do, and I talk to a lot of leaders in business, and quite often you walk away with the feeling that they're not seeing the same thing that we're seeing. So let's go and have a look at some of the areas. Let's start with some technologies. Which are the technologies that you think have really revolutionized business already? So we've already been going through exponentialism for, say, the last decade or so.
Yeah. Well, I think, the sort of fundamental technology that's changed everything, Colin, and it's pretty generic, is nothing more complex than just connectivity. We're sitting in the world today with 7.5 billion people, and almost 4 billion of those now are using 4G, at least, smartphone devices to connect to each other and to the system and so on and so forth. In the next few years, that number will probably rise to virtually every single person on the planet. So just the notion of global connectivity between billions of citizens who can now collaborate, can engage, can create movements way outside their sort of jurisdictional territories that influence and shape behavior, the market, social responses, politics for that matter. So to me, that's been one of the most profound general changes, if you like. And, if you think when I started my career in law many decades ago, we were the first firm to have a fax machine. And you'll recall that the fax machine on its own was pretty useless until someone else had a fax machine. And then the more fax machines, the more useful it became. And today, that was the world of connectivity in the early or mid-1970s. Connectivity today has just blasted all of those rules out of the water. And I think some politicians, Barack Obama was one of the first global leaders to understand the power of this connectivity and what it means to talk to individual citizens and raise money, and by the way, very small amounts of money to fund these election campaigns. But he was the first one that's understood this exponential impact of connected individuals, and he tapped into that, positively.
And then what do we expect to go over the next, 5 or 6 years? Because connectivity really does allow many things to go and change, and we've got this additive effect of so many other technologies that are starting to come in and benefiting from this connectivity.
So where connectivity is changing is really fascinating. On the one hand, we've got the shift towards 5G, and no, we don't need to burn the towers down. And of course, by 2028, we'll probably have 6G. But the difference between 4G and 5G is not a 25% enhancement in speed. 5G literally is, for the first time in history, real-time data transmission with zero latency. So this opens up a massive new realm of opportunity. Think about, virtual reality, augmented reality, the kind of beam me up Scotty moment is not far off the horizon. And that changes the game. It means that businesses can now engage in real time with the entire supply chain, the entire ecosystem with zero latency. And that introduces a host of new opportunities. If you combine that with the shift towards Internet of Things, or as I like to say, Internet of absolutely everything, with the cost and size of data transmitting sensors plummeting, and the power of these sensors, the programmability of these sensors increasing, you're now getting the merger of the animate world, which is humans connected through their mobile phones and other devices, and the inanimate world, connecting the world of objects. And I see a future not that far away where 30 or 40, maybe 50% of every object ever manufactured will come standard with data transmitting sensors embedded in them. And when these inanimate objects or things start talking to each other, start talking to us, start talking to enterprise systems and so forth, the world of real-time, insightful data gets enormously exciting.
Okay, so we've got 5G, we've got VR, AR, we've got IoT. Where do we get the energy from to go and use these particular devices?
Well, I know where we don't get it from in this country, but we're not going to mention the E word at all, are we? Look, and this is one of the other big transitions, and it's what I've been speaking of for about 5 years now. I talk about the collisions in the world between the old world and the new world, and one of these big collisions is the collision between the carbon energy industry and the renewable energy industry. And And the only reason, to my mind, that the renewable factor or faction has not gained even more superiority is the trillions of dollars invested in the old carbon energy industry that are fighting for renewed relevance, but are kind of losing the game. And I think even the majors are now conceding that they need to write off billions of dollars on the annual balance sheets every year, because they're just not ever going to get a return on so-called stranded assets. But energy in the future is going to be really interesting because it's going to plummet in price and it's going to grow in accessibility. So what renewable does is it changes the game again. If you take energy as a cost in production, it's going to decline after some years, certainly after the initial capex, but even the initial capex in renewable is coming down. So imagine a world in 2030 where energy is ubiquitously available at very low cost, certainly much lower than today. And that again changes the nature of the game. Couple that, of course, with things like additive manufacturing, 3D manufacturing, or 4D or 5D manufacturing. And it changes how much energy we actually need to consume in big factories. So you'll remember, Colin, that one of the big arguments around carbon energy and coal-fired power stations, is the need for so-called baseload to drive industries that require heavy drawdowns of energy to fire furnaces, blast furnaces, and so forth. But when you change the nature of manufacturing to additive manufacturing, you need far less in terms of big drawdown of energy because you're manufacturing in a completely different way using different technologies. So the entire energy game, I think, is going to be an exciting and very different one, certainly for those countries that understand that.
So we've got prices falling exponentially. We've got output capacity, access increasing exponentially across a lot of the techs that you've just mentioned. Let's just bring in artificial intelligence to round it off and complete our sort of circle of virtuous technologies.
Yeah, so, there's so many sort of different forms of artificial intelligence, but I mean, let's sort of keep it really simple. I need to anyway, because, as a former lawyer, I'm not a technology expert with a PhD in engineering. But if you think of it just as the smart understanding and use of information, it's really a world of increasingly capable algorithms that are capable of understanding vast quantities of data in real time, drawing inferences and logic out of this data set, and then implementing actions that are pre-programmed, pre-written into a system to automate systems. That's how I would describe it, I guess, to a layperson. But it's nothing other than all the information we've ever had. It's now exponentially larger, it's more detailed, and it's the ability to interpret it, to act on it, and to automate many of these actions. And yes, they're the scaremongers. Elon Musk, one of my heroes, is one of them who says, it's a dark science and it's going to take over humankind. And I don't believe that at this stage, at least not for the next 20 or 30 years.
Cool. Now, let's think about the impact. By the way, on the survey, I think 82% of those that responded said that they also believe the world is exponential. But I thought it was important to kick this off because it's a fairly fundamental question to the next part that we're going on to. And so we've got all these technologies that are certainly fascinating from a consumer perspective. Do they have any impact in the business world? Are you seeing anything? Are you predicting anything?
Colin, I'm intrigued by why you think there's a difference between the consumer world and the business world. I mean, let's just respond first off by saying, if there's a difference for the consumer, absolutely by definition, there's an impact on the business world. Unfortunately, of course, very often business leaders don't see that connection as closely as they should be seeing it. And so, you remember also we used to have this conversation about a B2B business and a B2C business, and they're different and the rules are different and so forth. And I've always been kind of tickled by that because I've wondered where the heads of CEOs are that think that a customer experience in the B2C world won't have an impact on their business in the B2B world at some stage. If you're a CEO of a B2B relationship and you order something, let's say from Amazon online, and you get this incredible service experience, and that's great. And yes, it's just because you wanted a new golf club and it worked and it's brilliant. Why does the CEO of the B company that you're dealing with the next morning not think that your brain has now been sensitized to what incredible experience is all about? And why would you tolerate a slow clanky kind of engagement model, in the B2B world. So to me, they're absolutely one and the same thing. And I think in the world of big business, and it's interesting, I was reflecting this morning, thinking about the names of big companies that I think have responded remarkably well, overtly and in a very engaged way with their customer base during COVID. And I have to tell you, I found it quite difficult to come up with names of very large companies that have done that. And I'm not for a moment saying they haven't done wonderful things, from sponsoring, Pick and Pay, sponsoring feeding schemes for young children and hungry people and so forth. The banks said, you'll have a payment holiday, etc. They're not writing off the payment, and they're still charging interest on the money you haven't paid. So, yes, it's a short-term accommodation. But has there been really a profound response to a crisis, an emergency? And it's difficult to come up with too many of these names. So,
because I know that internationally there's been some fantastic press on some companies that have been doing incredible things. I don't know if we've just missed the press in South Africa.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, if my own experience personally of some of the big companies and some of them that have always traded off, customer relationships have been decidedly bad. In fact, yet I've come across any number of smaller enterprises, some micro enterprises that have been absolutely remarkable. In fact, they've been remarkable not just because of how they've engaged, but with the speed with which they've been able to significantly enhance their entire operation, even as a one-person show, which has been really interesting. So, they've been able to build an e-commerce experience system that is way more profound and way more impactful than the online experience of some major retailers. And yet they're just small operations, 2, 3, 4 people. How they've been able to do that? Well, it's not that they've suddenly found millions to employ smart people. It's that the cost of doing some of this is really plummeting. The processes, the plug-and-play models, the off-the-shelf tools, etc., the open source stuff is all available. And what it means is that if it's accessible to a 4-man or 4-person business, it's accessible to a multinational, right? The thing is in the thought process. So in the mind of the entrepreneur, they really think through very quickly and very humanly, what are the experiences I want to create for my customer at every single digital touch point. And then they're going to find these cheap or almost free tools to go and create that experience. And bang, they're an online enterprise delivering an experience that some of the very big players, with huge IT departments, don't seem able to do.
So let's go back to that question before though. So customers and businesses, we've got all these exponential technologies. We think the rate of change is going to just get faster, in all honesty, because they're so complementary, these technologies. Do companies have to change the way that they do business?
Yes, absolutely.
And how so? Because, I always look at it and think that maybe we'll take the anti-argument to start with. Maybe they don't. They've got balance sheet, they've got resources, they've got human capital, they've got IP and intelligence, they've got distribution networks, they've got well-oiled machines there for efficiencies within their organization. There's barriers to entry, economies of scale. They've got so many advantages. And now all these technologies come along and you just go, wow, here's an opportunity to actually just go and use these in ways unimaginable to us perhaps today and do incredible things. And yet time and again we see the kind of examples of the Kodaks and the Blockbusters, and many more over the last couple of, years. There's been some phenomenal disruption across industries. Why aren't they getting their hands stuck in and making these changes? And what should the changes be, perhaps? Let's start with that one. I think it's let's start with the precipice that there needs to be a change. But what is it? What is the perfect company, Anton, for this exponential world?
I think and by the way, you've left off one very important reason why they haven't, changed or maybe don't need to change, and that is momentum. These big organizations kind of almost succeed despite themselves. But what has shifted, and I think it's absolutely accelerated because of the sort of COVID experience. And by the way, in my mind, COVID-19 is it's big and it's real and it's scary and it's not going away very quickly. But it's just the beginning. There will be a COVID-20 and COVID-2021 probably in the next 10, 15 years. There will be environmental equivalents of COVID-19 that are going to be happening and so forth. But what COVID-19 has created is an awareness in the minds of consumers, customers, ordinary people, that money is not infinite and growth and real growth is not a given. It's raised an awareness of value, and it's created, I think, a deep-seated awareness of which relationships in our lives are important, not only at a personal level, and that's been pretty obvious. You know kind of who your friends are when you can't see them and they can't pop around to drink your good wine, but do they call you to see how you're doing or not? But also from a supplier point of view, from a business point of view, which of those companies that have clearly tried to work with me as the customer, that have tried to enhance my experience, that have tried to listen and respond appropriately. And so where am I going to spend my dollars going forward? And in a world of increasing choice, I think organizations are going to have to think very carefully about how they engage, what the value proposition is, and how they execute. And so I can't think of a single industry that is not going to have to quite significantly change how they do business. And then there's the obvious shift in business models. What's valuable in the old world is becoming commoditized and cheap and free and accessible in the new world. So what sets you apart? And the one question that I'm asking leadership teams is, imagine your business was vaporized this afternoon, just disappeared today. What would your customer base miss in the morning? And it's probably got nothing to do with your product, because again, there's any number of organizations that can step in and supply whatever it is or a close alternative to your product. So what is it about your business and engagement model that makes you relevant and important and woven into the mind and hearts of the customer? And I think all of that is changing. So Colin, I'd really want...
Anton, is it really more important? Because these ideas of customer centricity and placing the customer at the heart of your game plan, they've been around for decades. Consultants have been writing about this forever. Yep. Is this technological revolution making it even more important, or is it just the same level of importance as it always was, and we're just bad at doing it on average across corporates?
Yeah, Colin, I'm always bemused by this notion of customer centricity. I mean, you're right, it's been around forever, and it should be banned, actually, because it's become meaningless. Companies say we're customer centric, and and then they put you onto a call center, and the first expression you hear is, we value your custom, please hold on. And then there's some lousy music that you can, that's unclear and crackly, starts playing for 7 minutes or 17 minutes or whatever it is. And so, we've spoken about it forever and it's been around and it's been taught, but have we really understood it? And for me, the issue has got nothing to do with technology. Technology is just the enabler. I think, and we'll talk about attributes of future relevant leaders, but, I would say that it's time that leadership sits down and thinks as a human being about what the customer experience really is. It's high time that leaders actually just put themselves through their own processes as a customer. Not phoning in to say, hi, this is your CEO, I'm here to test, what our store's doing today, kind of thing. But do it as the sort of mystery shopper. And I think many CEOs would be appalled at what the rest of the customer base has to experience. So to me, customer centricity, Colin, is not about the technology. It's about thinking through a human lens. And again, COVID has brought this humanness to the fore. We've been talking about it for a while. When we talk about future success metrics, should it just be PE ratios and profitability and size and quantifiable success metrics, or are there other ways of measuring success in the future? And increasingly the debate, whether it's about capitalism, whether it's about Wall Street, and Jamie Dimon and his group of merry CEOs saying there's a shift. It's actually about humanness. And there's one thing I think that we as leaders need to understand. In this world of technological explosion, it's easy to hide behind the tech. It's easy to embrace and harness the tech. And if we're not careful, tech will take over our lives. And there's a growing realization that the tech, we mustn't become the tech. We must actually accentuate what it means to be deeply and profoundly human, enhance that, celebrate that, bring that to the fore in our business models, and use the tech simply as a back-end execution enabler.
What sort of business models do the leaders need to be looking at then? I mean, we're living in this VUCA exponential world, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and things are moving quickly. It's, you're having to change on a dime. Organizations that are doing well in that space, presumably, are not the same as the big, complex, siloed structures that, we've seen being successful for the last couple of decades.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a business model point of view, Colin, it's all about understanding what is really valuable. And it's understanding it with two very important caveats. The one is, from a customer lens, what is really valuable? Not what you do at what cost and therefore price in a margin and sell it at that number. But from a customer lens, what is really valuable? What is the experience or the utility all about? And what will they pay for that? And then it's understanding how to deliver that in a way which rewards the innovation, the capital investment, the risk-taking, the execution skills, all of that, but in a way where your interests as the producer of whatever this is are aligned as closely as possible with your end customer and consumer. And so there's this appreciation of value and there's an alignment around that. And it's the merger of the two that then creates new business models.
All right, so let's put this into brass tacks. I'm sitting on the board and we're about to employ a new CEO, okay? Big company, multinational listed. What kind of attributes should we now be looking for this new set of CEOs to go and deal with that company in this new challenging VUCA exponential world? Let's start trying to list a few, and maybe there's a few board members out there that it will help them to go and get some really good quality people in who can transform those businesses to do exactly what you've just said there.
So for me, the increasingly important number one criteria of a leader in today's day and age and leading into the future is, are they motivated and moved by a higher order reason for being? In the old days, we used to talk about vision, mission, and all of those horrible things. But today, we talk about this world purpose. And it's also at risk, I guess, of being overtraded and therefore losing its meaning. But what is it that an organization and a leader actually is motivated by? Why do they get up in the morning? Why are they happy to sacrifice personal time with their families and other loved ones in order to pursue this ambition? And so it's the fire in the heart, not the mind, of the CEO that says, I want to do or deliver or shift or change this in the world. And I'm driven by that. And I'm going to be uncompromising, unrelenting in my pursuit of achieving that higher order purpose. To me, that's become really, really number one. And it's going to become even more important. COVID, again, has added to this drive to elevate the role of understanding why you exist in the world. The other features, by the way, that are going to propel us even further are things like the level of inequality in the world, the threat to capitalism as a sort of a fundamental economic philosophy or way of governing economic and social systems. Even the notion of kind of liberal democracy, all of these are adding a voice and a volume to this debate. Let's press pause, let's slow down and understand what is this game called life actually all about. And as a company, what do I need to do to be relevant in that?
Let's assume now, let's take our example a little bit deeper. So we are now looking for a purposeful CEO, but I'm sitting on the board and I'm saying, Anton, hold on a minute. For generations here, we've done very well by having a profit focus, short term, I admit, but our quarterly returns and our dividends for our shareholders are incredibly important. We would feel remiss at the board level to actually go and employ someone with a purposeful intent as opposed to a profit-driven one. Do you at least have some examples to go and back up this claim that purpose is now becoming a kind of critical differentiator?
Well, Colin, I think any board member that says it's either or it's purpose at the cost of profit, that board member should be fired and should be replaced. Because again, in the old world, it was binary. It was either this or that. It was profit versus purpose. In the new world, the conversation has shifted into profit and purpose. And if you look at it statistically now, there's a growing and overwhelming statistical evidence that companies that are motivated and fueled by some form of higher order purpose that resonates with the people in the organization and with the marketplace actually end up in the medium to long term delivering more profit, quantifiable bottom line after tax net profit, than companies whose purpose is solely to deliver shareholder value. So you'll remember, I think it was in August last year, maybe September last year, that Jamie Dimon and his tribe of 250 top CEOs in the US issued a statement. And in that statement, they said, we now recognize that the notion that companies are there for shareholder purposes or shareholder profit only has been fundamentally mistaken. It's one of them, and it needs to be, obviously, because you need to reward the investor that put the capital in. But actually, the role of a company in society needs to be much wider than that. A friend and colleague, Raj Sisodia, wrote an amazing book a long time ago called Firms of Endearment. A lovely play on the movie title, Terms of Endearment. And Raj proved again that there are, those organizations that have a clear raison d'etre that's powerful and emotional actually end up making more profit 5, 10, 15, and 20 years than the S&P 500 companies.
Who are your favorite purposeful organizations at the moment?
Sorry?
Who are your favorite purposeful organizations at the moment?
Well, I think, to me, Procter & Gamble is one of those that kind of comes to mind for lots of reasons. And by the way, on your CEO attributes, they're running a wonderful international competition for young students. And they say, do you know who should be our next CEO? Please come and present what your thoughts are on the attributes of Procter & Gamble's future CEO. And they're running this competition globally amongst young people in any country in the world, and the winners get flown to the States, and it's a big gala event. And of course, through the process, they identify some really fantastic young people they should be employing. But I think, what we've been taught on MBA programs and business schools over the years is it's all quantifiable, quantitative metrics. And it's some CEOs, I guess, will be uncomfortable with the fact that one of the most important attributes is actually a very emotional, personal feature.
Okay, so I'm buying into it, so we'd like you to take the job, but it's not as simple as just having a kind of purposeful intent. I mean, I'd like you to come in and do Tesla, and our goal is to make sustainable transport commonplace, not build cars, or come to us at Unilever and, to help make sustainable living commonplace. Where else could you go? You could go to Discovery and try to help people live longer and healthier. So this purpose thing is catching on, but just that alone isn't really going to go move the dial too much. There's lots of other changes in leadership styles that are starting to be to seriously be reported about. Maybe one day they'll get onto MBA courses. Which are the sort of the ones that you think are kind of most important in this VUCA world?
So the next one for me would be two combined, really, I guess, and they're close cousins. The one is a high level of curiosity outside your own industry, and coupled with that is a real ability to think in terms of systems theory. So as this ecosystem, is, and we're now beginning to understand the sort of Gaia theory, if you like, that everything is interconnected. It's one ecosystem, and it's like a balloon. You press the balloon in one spot, and it kind of pops out on the opposite end. So it's a person who is able to think of the complexity of the world and the interrelationships between each of the levers that CEOs pull as they're running their organizations. You do this, it's going to have multiple other effects. And the curiosity is to understand what else is going around outside my industry. And what might that be? What impact might that have in my business? It's really interesting, Colin, when you talk to a group of execs about their children and ask them to share a story about what is it about their kids that they really find fascinating or scary. And they get very animated, and they talk and they share ideas, and they tell you, my 4-year-old hacked my home network password, and so on and so forth. And then after 5 or 10 minutes of this really lively debate, you ask them to say, so what does it mean for your company? And I kind of look at you sort of strangely, and I said, what does it mean for your business? And when you have this conversation for half an hour, you see the penny drop that they've never, ever thought about the implications for their business, judging from the behavior of their 4, 5, or 15-year-olds. So I think leadership needs to be curious about, things that are in front of us, things that are obvious, like the behavior of our kids, but also what's happening in other industries, in other parts of the world, in society generally. on the streets. What are people talking about? What are they feeling? What are they fearing? What are they dreaming about? And then have a strategic conversation about what does that all mean for my business? And then, of course, to make decisions flowing from that. So the third aspect of leadership is, for heaven's sake, it's a complex world. Understand that there's not very often one right answer, but the ability to take fast decisions, I think, is crucially important. And I don't mean being dictatorial. I mean, engaging in conversations, et cetera, but so often you read, and it's prevalent in government, we've got to communicate and talk and have workshops and forums and this and that and the next thing, but for heaven's sake, please take a decision. And if it's wrong, let's change it and execute with speed, but take a decision. And that leads me to the next feature then, which is about execution. We can have the finest strategy in the world. It's thought through, it's insightful, it's human, it's empathetic, it's driven by a wonderful purpose and all of those good things. But if you can't actually go and do it, it's not worth an awful lot. So how do you get things done? How do you motivate people to go above and beyond? Not just to arrive, for a paycheck after 30 days of time. How do you motivate and excite people, and how do you get them to get things done? Are you a leader that's able to remove obstacles in an organization that prevents things from getting done? And, every one of us on this call, I'm sure, would say, wow, we have too many meetings and too much email. Guys, we're all adults, we're all experienced and we're all senior executives. Why don't we fix it? But we bleat about these things for decades. And so it's the ability to cut through the nonsense, to face up to have the tough decisions and the tough conversations and get things done, and very often you have to get things done in the face of adversity. People will not like what you're doing. People will be threatened by it. People will be resistant, reluctant to change, of course. And yet leaders need to have those tough conversations and pave the way for people that are desperate to make progress. And I believe in the goodness of humanity. I think everyone wants to kind of give their best. But when you arrive at work and there's so many obstacles, then you just eventually get worn down.
Look, what you're describing there sounds very sensible when you think about it. You should be curious. Another term there that is quite popular is have an outside-in approach to your business so that you're casting the net widely. You should be transparent. I think, you've got lots of examples of really great leaders who are incredibly transparent. Airbnb recently, when they were talking about retrenchments, is just one example. The decision-making is obviously critical. It doesn't have to be the right decision, but it's got to be a decision. So we've heard these things before. What is it that's preventing many existing leaders from doing these things, though? Because they sound like everyone should be able to do this with a bit of thought. And yet that's not the case.
I think we've allowed ourselves as leaders, Colin, to get wrapped up in the machinations of large organizations. We've built a set of operating rules around us that kind of prevent or make it very difficult to do that. Samantra Ghoshal, who's no longer with us, but was a fantastic guy. And he's an Indian that was born in Calcutta, was at the end of his life living in Fontainebleau in France. And he said, organizations have a smell to them. When you walk in, an organization has a smell to it. And he says, some companies smell like Calcutta in summer. All right, it's 40 degrees Celsius, it's 110% humidity, and even when you're on holiday and you want to go and play a game of golf, it's not possible. All you want to do is just sit down and vegetate. It's just oppressive. And other companies smell like Fontainebleau. It's a forest. On a Sunday morning, you've got a hectic, tired week, you're exhausted. All you want to do is walk in the forest slowly and just smell the fresh air, and yet it's not possible. When you walk into that forest, all you want to do is run, skip, hop, and jump, because it's not possible to be slow. And so companies smell like downtown Calcutta in the summer, or they smell like Fontainebleau Forest, right? And it's a consequence of systems, of processes, of little things. And it's not the big stuff. It's very often a whole bunch of really little things. But as leaders, we've elevated ourselves beyond seeing them and responding to them and reacting to them. We've just allowed them to germinate and multiply in our organizations. We've tolerated what I call corporate terrorists. These are people that say yes in the meeting and then leave the meeting and stab you in the back and make sure the new project doesn't work because they feel threatened by it. They actively try and undermine what it is you're trying to achieve. And as leaders, we know they exist, but we tolerate them. Why, for heaven's sake? You know, there's so many big things in the world we need to fix, and we're not going to succeed if we allow these sort of behaviors to overwhelm us.
Look, if we're going to go and start that change, then presumably we've got to get other people to go and believe that a change is required, that there's a problem. I get the feeling that a lot of leadership teams, it's quite comfy. It's not comfy as in it's not stressful, but at least the stress is understandable. It's what they've been through for many years. And they're not being asked to go and take a step back and really review whether they've got significant unconscious bias and whether they need to be more transparent and quite fundamentally change the way that they lead. How do you start them on that particular journey?
Well, you know, it's often said...
Let's make it even harder for you, Anton. Let's put that as a question to say, how do you go and start them on that journey when they're in companies that are actually currently profitable and doing reasonably well? The hardest time to instigate change.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, success is a demon because it makes you complacent. It makes you feel overconfident in your own ability to get things right or do things correctly, etc. So I think the check is to, I mean, it's either carrot or stick, right? If it's stick, it's to try and persuade the team or the leader, you know, of the potential for disintermediation, irrelevance, new competition, changing business model, etc. It's the stick. If you don't change, it's going to hit you a year, 2 or 3 down the line. The other, of course, and it's one that I prefer, is the carrot, because the stick is often motivated with a quantitative analysis in Excel and pie charts. And really no great change in the world has ever been triggered by Excel. Indeed, Martin Luther King, you know, didn't say, I have a budget, a strategy, and a spreadsheet. He said, I have a dream. And to me, it's the carrot approach, Colin, that I've found more exciting, is when you ignite the aspiration to do more, better, for more, for a better set of reasons, and in the process, deliver more return to those innovators and investors in your organization. And yourself as the leader, you leave a you know, more profound legacy in the world. To me, that's always been much more powerful because then the difficult decisions become easier when you're inspired at an emotional level. You know, people that have worked with me know, and they chuckle when I use the word goosebumps, because to me, it's such a simple but visceral, physical reaction to a story that a CEO tells. If you don't get changed or impacted at an emotional level, boy, the tough decisions that you might have to take are going to be so much more difficult if all you're relying on is Excel. You know. And I guess, you know, and that's why we have performance conversations with people based on the standard distribution curve, you know, because it's easier to say, well, you know, the Excel tells me to the second decimal place that you're in that quadrant, therefore your pay grade is that and that, you know, rather than have a very difficult, imprecise conversation with someone about what their true potential is, what value they're bringing, what they need to work on, etc. And that's difficult.
You mentioned earlier that one of the critical roles, I think you use different wording, but we're going to use Inspire because it's the series name. Leaders today have got to find ways to inspire their teams. So we've got the purpose, and I think that helps because if you can have something which emotionally resonates, it's easier to find people that want to go on the journey. What else with, you know, the changes that we're seeing can leaders or should leaders be doing, which they typically don't, to inspire everyone, all of their stakeholders, from staff through to customers, to go on these journeys with them? And let's say, I can tell you what it's not. It's not sitting in their, you know, executive committee, you know, and meetings day in, day out, talking strategy and resolving problems. That's definitely not going to be inspiring people at scale. It possibly might inspire some of the people that they're connecting with directly on a regular basis, but for larger organizations, I don't feel that's enough. What else can they do?
I think one of the most important things is collaboration. You know, how do you build collaborative relationships, not only with your own people, but people in your ecosystem, your supply chain? And core to that is storytelling. You know, can you tell a story that makes someone sit up and listen, that helps someone understand their role in making the story come real and come alive, and how exciting that will be? And you need to be able to do that at every level of the organization. Some of the great leaders that I've worked with, had the privilege of working with in my career over sort of multiple industries, have been really good at sitting down with a very junior member of the team and just chatting to them about A, how they're feeling, but B, about what the organization is trying to achieve. And sometimes these have been big organizations with lofty ambitions. but telling a story that makes it understandable and real for the receptionist or the security guard at the entrance gate to the office complex, and helping them think through how they can participate in that ambition in their own small way. And what I've also realized, again, having done the MBA and been involved in many businesses, it's when those sorts of people understand what it is the journey is all about and how they can play a real meaningful part in it, then they start doing little things that have exponential impacts. I'll tell you, one of my favorite stories, Colin, is of a security guard in one of the buildings in one of the companies in this country. And of course, all of us arrive at a big fancy marble office block with stainless steel and blah, 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 blah. And the first thing we have to do is meet the security guard and sign that stupid security register, right? And every one of us hates it. And we all know it serves no real practical purpose. The book is dog-eared, the pen hardly ever works, etc. And so we just scribble stuff that are illegible. And so we described this to the security guard, and we said, how can you make the experience of our clients better when they arrive here? And we said, they all hate this book that you always shove under their nose. And he came back to us a week or two later. He said, tell me, you know all your customers really well, don't you? And we said, yes, we do. We've gone through due diligence, KYC, all of that wonderful stuff. He said, well, why don't you put a tiny little green sticker on the windscreen of all your customers' cars, so that when a car draws up at my boom gates, in a multi-tenanted building, the green sticker car, I say, good morning, ma'am, good morning, sir, and I wave them through with a smile. I can't tell you the difference that customers phone me. What happened? Exponential impact, zero cost, tiny little thing. But it came from inspiring the lowest paid person on the payroll to think about how they could play a part in the company journey.
So here's a quick list of some of the items that you've highlighted. Purpose, which we're going to come back to again in a minute. Curiosity, outside-in thinking. Transparency, authenticity, passionate sort of execution. Experimentation comes through as a sort of a generic theme that goes with all of these things. And in many ways, for a lot of leaders, I think a lot of these are quite challenging. Mystery shopping, that was another one that you mentioned. It's so kind of obvious, really, if you want to go and de-layer and find out what's happening faster. There's a lovely example, if we have time, we can explore in a wee bit. Those are important steps for people if they want to be making their organizations more adaptable, right? So that they can actually pivot quicker and experiment. But we've got quite a few questions coming from purpose. So I'm just going to leave those now and let's go and pick through some of these. Have you got examples of purposeful organizations that place purpose before profits? I definitely know you've got a couple. We were chatting about one or two before actually the call started there, Anton. Yeah.
So I think Patagonia Clothes is absolutely one of those. Their whole purpose is all about the environment, nature, outdoors, and so they do outdoor clothing, adventure equipment, and so forth. And the thing about purpose, Colin, is it's all very well having a purpose that's emotional and gives you goosebumps when you hear it and so on and so forth. But you've also got to stand up for it. And Patagonia had the courage to do the almost unthinkable. When the President of America cut back on the funding for the maintenance of America's nature parks, Patagonia sued the President of America. Now, that takes some doing, and it's probably career limiting in many respects, particularly with the kind of current president. But that's what you've got to do. So when you have a purpose, it's not just about the fluffy words. It's about doing things that are real, hard, tangible, and sometimes very, very difficult to give credence to it. So Patagonia is one. I think Harley Davidson is another. They've created a sort of a cult, a following, at a visceral level amongst their consumer base, and they stand up for that. I think in South Africa, Adrian Bourne, Discovery, it's an interesting one because in many respects, he ticks absolutely all the boxes. And I have to say that Discovery is one of the big companies that I engage with personally that actually early on in COVID, maybe after a month, actually phoned up and said, Anton, this is not a sales call about your life cover or your medical cover or this or that. We just want to know how you're doing. And that took me a bit by surprise. I was expecting the next sentence to be, and by the way, we have another product. It wasn't there. It was just about, I want to know how you, Carl and Ashley, my family, and they knew the names, we're doing. Not difficult to know the names. I pay their premiums every month. On the other hand, it's not the cheapest. They do have a big fancy building and so forth. But I think he's more successfully than most been able to blend the finance and the story really, really powerfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And in answer to the question, I think there's lots of sources if you want to go and explore more. If you just do a search for purposeful organizations, you're going to find a lot of websites that highlight these examples. If you follow Harvard Business Review, it's popular at the moment. If you follow the B Team, you're going to find examples. That's Richard Branson. I think if you look for exponential organizations, the top 100, you're going to find examples. So this isn't let's call it not a new thing, but I think it's a thing which is generating a lot of interest at the moment, particularly because of COVID-19, and you're seeing more and more leaders and organizations want to go down this purposeful route. And I guess one of the reasons is because you're now able to bring together this, we have to be making something that solves a societal problem, and we can do it at scale, and therefore it can generate profit. So we really can refocus on doing things which are good for the planet. That's a technology-driven thought process, and you've got people there that want it, the customers, the 6 or 7 billion people out there that really want to go and deal with those sorts of organizations. So yeah, there are lots of examples. And if you want more, just ping me or ping Anton and we'll share some of those websites. I love the next question. Do you see evidence of purpose-driven organizations? What is it? How do you see the evidence of purpose-driven organizations and not just simple slogans? My view is you can smell organizations that just have these as slogans because, but Anton, what do you think?
No, I mean, it's a smell. I mean, I use the Calcutta Fontainebleau story, so let's stick with smell. You just know it. You just feel it. You experience it. You feel it. It's real. It's tangible. Can we use one example? And we're not going to mention any names just in case they're on the call. I'm not going to choose. And I don't have to because it's an industry problem. It's an industry I'm from. Banking. I can promise you every bank has some kind of purposeful statement on their website. And I can promise you, I don't know any banks realistically that are legacy banks that really have a strong purpose at the heart of their DNA. Yeah. And I think that, Colin, is just highlighted. And if you take some of the big oil majors are exactly the same, right? I mean, one of the big ones, BP, changed its name and its logo, became a sunflower, and it was all about beyond petroleum, the planet, the environment, all of the good stuff. But then they lie to us about what happens when there's a big oil spill and so on and so forth. So you just know the authenticity, and I guess that's a dimension of leadership that I haven't mentioned yet is authenticity, and I prefer maybe to use the word human. Just be a good human as a leader. Understand what humanness is all about, and don't take on board the fancy trappings of the title and the salary and the share options and so forth. Just understand what your behavior, what your role means for ordinary people in every level of society. And deliver that consistently and authentically. And people just get to understand it. They really, really do. I can think of some of the South African retailers that, do a huge amount of good, no question about it. But then they'll wrap everything in plastic in the fruit basket, and they'll reduce the quantity from 400 grams to 300 grams, but the price goes up 5%, and things like that. Simon, we've just called in, and we'll hand over to him in a second, but the questions are coming in thick and fast towards the end, or maybe I just missed them, which is a shame. We'll try to answer them perhaps later as an email. But anyway, how would one approach, I just love this question because it cuts to the chase so nicely. How would one approach senior management with the suggestion of them to put themselves in the customer's shoes and to go through the process that our clients go through daily, the mystery shopping example? I'm thinking of some CEOs and organizations that I mentioned. I would say ask them, are they brave enough?
Especially with the view that some of these senior executives at least appear to be quite confident that they know best and don't need to do that.
Just ask them if they're brave enough. And if they think they know best, if they think they're going to have a great experience, invite them to enjoy a great experience. And then see what the feedback is.
By the way, Capitec, to give dues to the banks in South Africa, at least, are one bank where I do know their executives do mystery shop and get involved quite detailed on a regular basis, at least once a month in the customer journey, and I think the results are telling. Simon!
So we come off mute. How are you?
Hi, Simon.
Yeah, Colin, thanks very much. I mean, we've been, to all our customers out there, we've been on an incredible journey with both Future World and Colin from Innovation Catalysts as an organization. As you all know, we've been through quite a bit as an organization, and our group CEO, Stephen van Coller, has taken us on a journey, an exponential journey, or a journey toward becoming an exponential organization. And for me, I think one of the most poignant things in working with Anton and Colin has been the framing of our purpose. And I think in that process of shaping how we become an exponential organization with a wealth of capability that we have as iOCO, we framed this purpose around the word solve. So an organization with such rich capability that can do such amazing things for clients, we found this one word. And what's been incredible is to see how a purpose statement of solve exponentially, courageously, and together has actually shaped the way our people have started to think about customers, behave, engage with clients. And so from that point of view, we're on a journey. We're by no means there yet, but certainly a long way down the road, becoming a purposeful organization. So, Anton, thanks very much for sharing some of the context of how that fits together. And yeah, we certainly be working with you and very open to our clients reaching out to you to explore this further. Just a shout out and a mention to some of you on the call today: Investec, Distel, Sasol, the Mimecast team. Thanks for joining us. One of our partners, Nampak, Transnet, Stephanie Stocks, AB InBev, just to name a few. We thank you for participating in today's session. We hope you've been inspired, and for all the time you've given us over the past 4 weeks to join us for this iOCO Inspire series. But also beyond Anton today, just like to thank Charles Savage from Easy Equities, Zafar Mohammed Zaf from Cell C, Snare Shah from Resolve, and our comedian John Blismus, who joined us from Henley last week. I think every week we've had fantastic feedback from you, our clients. Things like thought-provoking, inspiring, refreshing, insightful. And that's been great to see that in this chaos of COVID, we can break out for an hour, just spend some time with you to think, beyond the normal about our futures. And I think these things equip us to handle change. So please look out for the second in our series, in our Inspire series. We've had 5 now. We're going to be taking a short break for a couple of weeks and coming back during the month of August, hopefully with a power-packed edition with a similar theme and hopefully something that you'll feel and find is valuable in your journeys in still hopefully less of lockdown then, but yeah, we hope it's helping. We're also launching something called the iOCO Solve Think Tank, which is going to be something we're doing again with Colin. It's going to be an opportunity for us to frame a challenge. So it's a pilot session, frame a challenge, probably a social challenge, but we'll leave that up to you as clients. And we're going to be getting together with you in a session like this to work together in remote rooms, to use exponential principles to try and take on and tackle a challenge that we can solve together. We're really looking forward to that. It's going to be a first for us doing it with you, but hopefully that's going to work. The success of this series wouldn't have been possible without you. So once again, thanks to all of you, to everyone, to our marketing team to put it together. Thanks very much. Goodbye and stay safe. Thanks, Colin.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. And Anton, last words.
Folks, don't be trapped by the realities of getting through the current time. It will end, the sun will rise, and there's an exciting world waiting for us if we think differently about what it is we should be doing as organizations, as also as individuals. My favorite word at the moment, I guess, is recalibrate. I think we all understand kind of what that means. But I think if we just change our thinking about why we exist, what it is that's valuable, let's get out there and make South Africa and the world a better place. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thanks, Anton. Thanks, Simon. And we'll see you again, hopefully in a couple of weeks. Stay safe.